Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And welcome to another session, another Saturday, another piece of cake with him in the, I think it's the yellow beige kind of corner.
Yep,
He's introduced
Abdurraheem
you.
Green, and that one in the sort of, I don't know what you call it. It's almost black and white, bro.
You know what? Maybe
It's
because
just black and white.
maybe I started watching that Macbeth, the new Macbeth on Apple, and I'm feeling a bit in that sort of dark kind of mood.
Yeah, it is. It's very sort of grey and sort of like, Wait, is there some new movie out about Macbeth or something? Is there?
Yeah, no, it came out yesterday on Apple TV, and I taught Macbeth in schools, and
Oh yeah, I learned that for A
and
levels as well. Macbeth, yeah.
Shakespeare's play, but the new one with Denzel Washington, all-star cast. I watched the first 15 minutes. I got a bit tired last night. I'm going to watch it with my wife, inshallah. But staying true to the scripts. Okay, Denzel Washington is playing Macbeth.
Yeah.
It's in black and white. The acting is superb.
Yeah. Well, Denzel Washington's a great actor. Which sort of takes us straight into our whole conversation, to be honest, bro. It's like a really interesting comparison between, what we, studying Macbeth, a great piece of literature, like some of the great literature of the modern world, I guess. Yeah. And a relatively modern world, I would say. Yeah. And as opposed to what we're dealing with now, 37 TikToks, videos, content that, if it doesn't hold your or grasp your attention in the first 10 seconds, you've lost your audience. And like the big chasm between those two type of things. And I guess our whole theme is really about, is social media really antisocial? And more, I guess, problematically, there seems to be a lot of evidence that it's actually destroying our ability to think and to think critically. So what do you feel, bro? Because I know you're like getting a bit frustrated just now with technology. So.
I know, yeah, you saw me getting a bit frustrated coming on. Yeah. That's right. I think what you said is a really good juxtaposition. Jumping in with that, and we're about doing the contrast with Macbeth and Shakespeare and theatre and quality of content and attention span. With Shakespeare, for example, the attention has to be to detail, and it has to be throughout the play and the different acts and the different scenes, the soliloquies, understanding the greater messages or moral messages or immoral messages that are permeating the story. And as you said, when you just switch that to today and social media, wa alaikum salam, brother Jordan, and all of those who have joined us, that you said, as you said, 10 seconds attention span.
Yeah.
Imagine a blockbuster movie or play as Shakespeare would have been at that time, and everyone walking out after the first 10 seconds because it didn't grab their attention. And this brings me to an article, Malik Islam Kira, where
I think, bro, just as a point, right? Like both you and me have studied Macbeth, right? So it was an very interesting way to start this program, totally coincidentally. I think, Macbeth has a couple of passages that are so poignant. Yeah.
More than a couple.
They're almost Quranic. Yeah. Like, especially when that tomorrow creeps on at this petty pace from day to day. Life is just a stage and we are just players strutting our stuff out, brief candle. That whole, like, it literally makes my hair stand on end just remembering it, because it's this.
And Lady Macbeth, remember the dua she made? She wants such evil. She's asking for Shaitan to take my body and bestow upon me such evil to be able to do with the deed, just so that so that Macbeth can become first he becomes Earl or Lord of Cawdor after the battle, and then the prophecy of the so-called prophecy of the witch that he will become king. It's such a powerful play, and it shows about greed. And it shows about,
and that's why it's powerful, because it's about good and evil. It's about greed. It's about the temporary nature of this world and power in this world. and lust after power and how futile it ultimately is, yeah, and about the greater virtues. Yet it's not that it's not entertaining, it's not that it's not gripping, because Shakespeare, Macbeth is not, it's not a super long play compared to the others. So, and
Right.
it's definitely tense, it's definitely gripping, and it's got some funny moments as well,
Has,
right?
yeah.
You've always got your little comedians in there to sort of give you a laugh. But you're right, the bottom line is that these are deep subjects about very important things in life. Yet today, what we're faced with is, I mean, these little sound bites, these, you know, these the most you get is these sort of little phrases that are almost laughable. You know, like, you know, in order to be great, you know, you have to look beyond the horizons, you know, like those sort of little quotes that, you know, like, you know, life is like a bicycle, or riding a bicycle, you know, in order to live it, you have to keep moving, or something, you know, Einstein, you know, like, and all of these things. It's like, and like, it's literally in one ear and out the other. I mean, I wonder
Right.
how many people literally sit down and say, wow, okay, I'm going to make this something that is actually going to give me direction in life. It's
Yes.
more like people go, oh yeah, the next one, right? And then, you know, the next thing, it's some, you know, people dancing to I don't know what. And the point being, ultimately, bro, is that exercising the brain, like exercising the body, right?
Mm.
It takes effort. In order to build a functional body, in order to have muscles that are functioning and that you can use in a functional way, right? You need to exercise them. You're not going to get physically fit and strong by sitting on your backside the whole time,
Right.
right? It's
Right.
similar with your mind. If you're not exercising your mind, if you're not thinking and contemplating deeply, then what's going to happen, bro?
Yeah. And as you said, Abdurraheem, I think basically the superficiality of social media, if we allow it to do that to us, okay, is a problem. It's a huge problem for the younger generations. And my wife and I were talking to our younger son a few days ago. She said something. I was like, wow, this is actually true. And she said that the younger generation, the millennials, and they have a different paradigm than we did.
Yeah,
We followed and learned from our parents and their parents and their parents, and they were our reference points,
yeah,
Abdurraheem. Okay,
yeah,
so that you were able to instill culture and values and everything
yeah,
like that. The younger generation today, we are not their reference point, and the gap between us and them is
yeah,
widening because their reference point is social media. And today, only today, I said to my son, I said, look, when you've got children later on, are you going to be saying my dad, my grandparents instilled such and such? No, you'll be going back and saying,
yeah.
let's go back to a 2022 meme or social
You won't
media.
even that, because see that here's the thing is that unfortunately not even that will happen. Yeah.
Okay,
That, because no one will remember these memes.
that's
That's
true.
my
That's true.
contention, right? Is because they're so trite. Yeah. They're not, they're literally, I guess they're like snorts of cocaine or something like that, right? You know, like
Mm.
whatever. Not that I've snorted cocaine, but I mean it's this sort of equivalent of some sort of temporary, you know, crack. You know, you get excited for like what 3 seconds, and then that's it. It's just like what's left. And I think like
Yeah,
there was a seminal book that was written in the 1970s. And I'm sure maybe a lot of our listeners have heard of Noam Chomsky. Noam Chomsky wrote this. This is later. He wrote this book, co-authored a book called Manufacturing Consent. And I think this is a really important, really important to contextualize what is going on. So in this, and you can watch the documentary if you're not into reading the whole book. The documentary is probably actually better. I do really highly recommend it. And basically, very quickly, the contention of this book is that the way that so-called democracies, they control people by controlling the narrative that people have. And what it does is it only allows conversation to take place within a very, very strictly confined and limited sort of confines of conversation. Because anybody who wants to have a deeper conversation that is outside the carefully crafted narrative, yeah,
right.
they will find it very difficult. because those conversations take more than 10 minutes. They take more than 15 seconds. All you can do in the 10, 15-second sound bites, which the news and the media give you, is just repeat the already pre-manufactured, that's why it's called manufacturing consent, because, and a perfect example of this, by the way, is the whole palaver of what's been going on with the recent pandemic, right? If you want to see pure manipulation, like at its highest level of propaganda and manufacturing consent, you can see it taking place. But this is generally true. Now, if I want to challenge the narrative, I mean, with something like the pandemic, you can't. Like, even if you are a qualified professor in microbiology, you get shut down and you get your account frozen, right? Like the guy who invented the RNA, you know, whatever, you probably, I don't know if you've seen that interview with him with that famous podcaster, right? He got banned from Twitter just because he wasn't towing the line of the normal narrative, right? And that's the point, is that all you can do in these democracies is just say what they've already programmed everybody to say.
And speaking
one more thing, bro, let me just, I'm just going to paint the picture, right? So part of all of this, bro, part of all of this is the way in which we consume information, right? So the medium through which you consume information, in a sense, dictates your ability to process that information. So basically, if you're used to reading books, the nature of reading books means that you are going to be a thinking person, because reading a book takes time, it takes effort, it takes conscious effort in order to understand it. There's a lot of thinking involved. Listening to a podcast or a radio station, right, is less than a book, right? But definitely more than just watching TV, for example, right? And on the very least, you know, the spectrum of the scale that involves absolutely no effort is when you're scrolling through Instagram, when you're scrolling through TikTok, you just flick, flick, flick. There's no thinking going on there at all. And if you're not thinking, you're not exercising your brain. And if you're not exercising your brain, then how are you going to be able to think critically about the information that is being presented to you?
Excellent points, Abdurraheem. And before I go into it, I want to, Seamus has agreed with you on your points, some fantastic points. Chatterbox is asking, yes, Chatterbox, we are seeing the messages. If you ask questions, if they're ones that we can answer, we will answer. And I want to come back briefly to Lucy Wynne Jones. Sister Lucy, welcome, and alhamdulillah that you came to the Deen via social media. This is not talking specifically only against social media. There are obviously a lot of pros that we're going to discuss, and this
absolutely,
is
and we should
why we're doing what we're doing. We're here now, but so Jazakallah khair, Lucy, for highlighting that. Abdurraheem, what you've just highlighted from Noam Chomsky is fascinating. I haven't read the book. I'm fully aware of him and his works, mashallah. And Shireen said she's read the work as well. But that I was only discussing yesterday in another podcast that I'm doing with two American brothers. And it comes from my PhD research, but it matches exactly what you're saying, where society, the state, implements social control mechanisms in which what comes out of that are legitimized identities. In other words, law-abiding citizens, okay, in a general sense. But the legitimized identities subscribe to that narrative, what you're saying. Those who think against that, or who do not agree with that narrative, or ponder deeply and have questions, as you were highlighting, if you were to speak against the pandemic or anything today, you'll be chastised and marginalized. They fall into another, it's not a binary construct, it's more than two aspects, but they fall into a contrasting construct to legitimized identity, which is called deviance, resistance identity. Okay, that resistance identity is not just protesting, going against the state and whatever. It's just that they are not according or following that legitimized identity and that narrative that the government and the state wants you to follow. So what you're saying, I'm glad you said that, because it's only yesterday I was referring to my PhD studies and my data in that. And what's interesting is when we look at social media, and I shared this with you recently, that article, and I won't go into it in too much detail, is social media killing intellectual humility? What you said, shows
That's a
this.
whole nother, yeah.
It's doing a lot more than killing intellectual humility. And what's that intellectual humility? You are in an echo chamber where you
Yeah.
are only listen to those who validate your position,
This is
and
very, yeah.
opposite to that, anyone who disagrees with your position, you will align yourself with those who chastise, abuse, insult, troll.
Yeah.
It's become that
Yeah.
binary
Yeah.
where you cannot disagree in a healthy manner,
Yeah.
because you need to shut down the space of anyone who doesn't validate you within the echo chamber that you're actually in. So it's fascinating.
Yeah.
That's one perspective. As I've said to Sister Lucy Wynne Jones, we are going to speak about the positive aspects because there are many, but that ability to engage constructively, to think, to disagree, agree, accept that we're wrong, change our perspectives.
Yeah. I
That's
mean,
what.
and it's interesting, bro. Like, I mean, you've, in a sense, you've brought up a whole different, like it's interesting, our conversations, that we start with something and it just becomes bigger and bigger. But I mean, but it's very interesting what you said now, right? Is that the way the whole, it's not even a discussion. These binary viewpoints that are being formulated, that you have these two camps or these three camps, they're very, very clearly defined, and no one is listening to anybody anymore from the different camp. And there's a lot of commentators saying this is unprecedented. It's never been so ugly. Politics in America, for example, the United States, they said it's never been so ugly. Like, there were always disagreements between, say, Republicans and Democrats, but you could have a Republican married to a Democrat quite happily. Like, they'd live in the same house and get on with each other. It's almost like that can't happen. Like, people are, it's literally dividing families. And it's, I mean, from the outside looking at it, it's ridiculous, because like, what is I don't even know what's the difference really. Like, like someone, he did this picture of American, B-52 bombers dropping bombs, and the Republican one had American flags and US Air Force, and the other one, right, had gay pride and rainbows and this and that. But basically, they're still bombing and killing everybody. It's still the same thing going on, right? It was just with different colors painted on the fuselage of the whatever. And the point being is that the reality of the politics is the same, right? But I mean, the point being, I think the interesting thing is that what is driving these algorithms that drives information that you're interested in. So this is what is, I guess this is what is maybe the big challenge of social media, is because it's driven by revenue. Like everything else, it's driven by money. And that every social media platform wants to get you paying attention to it. They call it the eyes. So they all want you to be spending your time on their platform. And unfortunately, that's always going to appeal to the lowest common denominator for most of us, which is just entertainment and following our base desires, right? And temporary dopamine highs that give us these little kicks of dopamine, right? And we become these dopamine addicts, looking at all these social media things, right? And it's driven, and that's why, unfortunately, the algorithms don't drive content towards us that contradicts the opinion like it should do. In a way, we should all have to be, I mean, maybe regulation is what you need, is that people have to be able to look at the opposing point of view, right? You surely you have to have your viewpoints challenged. I mean, that surely has got to be essential. But that's the problem with the whole marketplace. That's the whole problem with social media, because it's driven by, as we said, it's driven by commercial interests. And that, by the way, is Chomsky's point as well. Chomsky's point as well with manufacturing consent is that all these corporations who control the media, the people who advertise, like, for example, Big Pharma, they're the biggest advertisers in America in media, right? They have directors, they have people on the board of every single major media institute in America, right? Because they want to make sure that nothing contradicts their message, right?
But you know what, Abdurraheem, on that, which is very important. Yeah, exactly. But there's an important point now that you've brought me back to. I think we spoke about it a long time ago. Great author Mbeli Achille Mbebe, sorry. He speaks about how we have become, us, the recipients, have become commodified through the Internet of Things. And he talks about, he aligns this with when slavery, transatlantic slavery emerged, and how they commodified black people by introducing the term black and making the distinction between black and white, because the Europeans at the time didn't even know what that meant. They didn't know what whiteness was, what blackness was. But when it became clear as a commodification, and that black was a value to be transported, enslaved, and everything, he said something profound about the 21st century. He said, through social media, through the internet, we have watched, forget color, the same strategy of us becoming commodified and becoming that blackness, that black commodity of the world, because we have succumbed, we have become enslaved to the internet, to social media. And he said, he calls it becoming black of the world, meaning an enslavement in a similar way, the commodification of ourselves through social media, through the internet.
We've basically become we've become the equivalent of the slaves for I guess a very few people, just as slaves were generally owned by a few rich plantation slave owners. We've become the same, but except we're the slaves of these tech giants and these bozos and Bill Gates and all the rest of them, right? We've become
we have been commodified, and we've done it. We've accepted it willingly. Aisha highlights, yes, particularly women, especially women, have been commodified, and children have become commodified as well. But the thing is, unlike that time,
it was
we are doing it willingly. We are doing it willingly. Enslave me. I enjoy
no one forced us to.
Exactly.
I mean, it's funny. I have this joke with my wife. Me and my wife have a constant thing. I call her a mad Mughal, because she's descended from the Mongols. So I'm always joking about, you Mongol this and that, the Mongol hordes and this and that, and she calls me cunning colonial, right? Cunning colonial. So I'm the cunning colonial, and it's like I said, and it was funny because we were having this thing today, and she was saying, well, at least we are, we were what we were, right? You're just like, and I said, it's true. Like, at the end of the day, colonialization, especially neo-colonialization, modern, it's all about controlling people without having to expend a lot of effort in occupying their lands with armies and military forces and this and that. It's an efficient way of controlling people with minimum effort, minimum expenditure, minimum loss of life. And it's the claim to fame of the Chinese. Like whenever the Westerners criticize increased Chinese control in Africa or whatever, the Chinese say, true, it is. We have interests wherever, in all of these places. Of course, they have commodities we want, but we haven't invaded any countries yet. We haven't invaded them. Right, we go there, we build infrastructure, and we enter into contractual agreements, and we get our raw materials cheaper, but we haven't invaded any countries, right? We just
like China.
Yes, we are colonizing, but we just, we're not doing it with the same brutality that you.
And there's a willingness of those being colonized. But Abdurraheem, coming back to that, the specific,
and that's the thing, isn't it?
The willingness, but coming back. Our behavior because willingly being enslaved, if you like, this is what it allows us to do on social media. As this article says, the internet encourages arrogance, the belief that one knows much more than one does. The internet's tailored social media feeds and algorithms have herded us into echo chambers where our own views are cheered and opposing views are mocked. Sheltered from serious challenge, celebrated by our chosen mob, we gradually lose the capacity for accurate self-assessment and begin to believe ourselves vastly more knowledgeable than we actually are. And we've seen that, Abdurraheem. I've seen individuals start giving advice medically to individuals, And if they reject that medical advice, and these are Muslims I'm speaking about, and you know who I'm alluding to, they've started saying that them using conventional medicines as alternatives and or not completely using prophetic medicines means that they are akin to the Khawarij. This is in their writings. Okay, exactly. I see your eyes like, what? How does that equate? This is the sort of language. I've seen individuals. If you go back, Abdurraheem, and you may remember this, particular sisters, some we know, some we don't know, but there was a culture where, and I realized this was happening in the 90s, but I wasn't too sure, but they would attend certain sisters delivering at the hospitals. And I thought it's to be their sisterhood, to be there, mashallah, this is what's happening. No, Abdurraheem, they were to make sure that you have to follow the sunnah, don't have the epidural, don't have the injections. Even if you can avoid gas and air, you want to be mujahida, do not do such and such. So there's this sister having her child under pain, under stress. We know what our wives went through. We will never know the pain that they're going through. And you've got that seemingly lending hand, which is not there for that reason. Now, transfer that to the internet, transfer that to a community, especially during the COVID period that we're in. And the threat of you being totally isolated and cut off if you are not going to subscribe to that echo chamber. So this is the ugly side of social media, where it's actually very, very anti-social media. And there are those who are taking advantage of that, and they know they're taking advantage of that. If there was no social media, these individuals who'd be taking advantage, these bullies, if you like, some of them are trolls, some of them are known individuals. Yeah. They would be silent because, as you know, the bully, once challenged, always steps back. So that bullying on social media is a lot more pervasive because you can't always isolate and identify who the individual are because they're hiding behind.
People are very brave behind it. You know, they get much more. I mean, this is another thing. This is another downside of social media. Is that, you know, like when you're actually in front of another human being, it is a lot more difficult just to be outright rude to them.
Right.
But when you're doing it behind the screen, there's this anonymity. It's a bit like bombing people from airplanes and sending over missiles, right? Or sending over drones. It's pretty easy to blow people up with drones. You're just there at the other end of a screen. There's you're not smelling any burnt flesh. You're not seeing any people blown up. It's about a part of the sad thing, I guess, when, you know, you are chopping at people with an actual sword. Yeah. When you chopped a person's head off, their blood splattered on your face. Yeah. It was pretty unpleasant and nasty and disgusting. And, you know, not a lot of people were cut out for that type of stuff. I mean, these days, any person who can operate a joystick and has played computer games can flip and fly a drone and blow a village of people up. It's the same with social media. We can throw these insults at each other and abuse each other and accuse each other of all sorts of things. I mean, to be honest, bro, with this whole pandemic, I think that numbers of people who are trying to stick to prophetic guidelines and natural medicine are few and far between. By far, the greatest amount of bullying and intimidation on a state level universally is promoted by Big Pharma. And to be honest, I don't trust them one single little bit. We had this conversation right at the beginning of this pandemic, and I didn't have much to say, but I remember what I said to you, and I said it to you, is that when we live in a world where you have organizations who can create a disease for which they are the only ones who can find a cure for it, we have to be very scared and very worried. Yeah. And I stick by that 100%. Right. It is extremely frightening and extremely scary. And I was just reading a comment today where someone said, imagine a corporation had such power and control that they were able to make sure that anyone working in any other corporation was not going to be able to do it unless they physically actually had to have and buy one of the products belonging to that corporation. Yeah. What crazy world would that be?
Yeah.
But that's the crazy world we live in. That's the crazy world we live in, right? So, I mean, the thing is and which sort of moves us to the plus side of social media, right? The plus side of social media, from the plus side, it does mean that you have access on an unprecedented scale to alternative sources of information. In many
Yes.
ways, if people are only ready to have the courage and to actually take the time to think critically, the more than any other time, the truth is out there. You can find the truth. You can get to the bottom of it. There are other sources of information apart from the mainstream narrative. And honestly, to be honest, bro, if anyone, right, trusts the mainstream, any mainstream narrative that is coming out from any government on the planet today, right, that person, I think they have to seriously consider their iman. They have to seriously consider whether they even got a brain. Because the level of corruption. I mean, you just look what's happening right now in UK. Look at it. Look what's happening in UK. Right. And UK, by the way, is like lowest on the corruption level in the world. Right. And look what is going on right now with our prime minister.
Right.
Look at these people who are partying every other day. And these are supposed to be the people who are so fully informed about how dangerous and destructive and deadly this whole thing is. Yeah. And they're partying away, bro. Seriously? Right. Are you serious?
Exactly.
Come on.
Yeah.
Like it's not about them breaking the rules. It's way deeper than that.
Yeah.
Right. If they really knew there was some poo hitting the fan and everyone was dropping dead, dying, you would not be partying. You would not be doing it. You'd be scared pooless yourself. Excuse my kids' language. Right. This is it, bro. But the great thing is one of the great things about social media, right, is that we can have these conversations. That we can, obviously they are being shut down increasingly, but you can access. And you can connect with people, and it is social. You can connect with people in an unprecedented way. And like all of these things, it's a double-edged sword. The possibilities for us to connect, like this podcast we're doing right now, right? For me, I will say, straight down, hands down, right? Social media has been a big blessing in my life. Big blessing in my life, right? It's taken me in directions that, subhanallah, alhamdulillah, just fantastic.
No, alhamdulillah, I think, Abdurraheem, I agree with you. I think with social media and the positives, I'm not so sure. Well, no, I'm still out on that. With regards to the younger generation, they still need to be schooled with regards to the fundamentals and rudimentary aspects, even though they're more tech savvy and everything than we are. But that doesn't mean that they're wiser than we are. That's one thing. I think that social media is positive for one of the reasons. Let's put it this way. Now all of you are aware of what the likes of I and my ethnicities have been going through for decades, if not centuries, with regards to the killings, the beatings, the brutalizations that we have suffered at the hands of institutional racism and their apparatus that support them. If you remember, in the early 90s, when it was
Rodney King, bro, like where it all sparked it off, right?
That was a cine camera which someone happened to have in their hand, and everyone was horrified and shocked by that. But we weren't. Abdurraheem, I shared my own personal story. There was no camera or anything then. It's something. So social media, we see what's happening with the Rohingyas. We see what's happening with the Uyghurs. We see what's happening, continuing to happen in Palestine. We see what's happening in Tigray at the moment. And that's from individuals like you and me, just making sure, you know what, I'm going to live stream this and I'm going to share it. So social media, overwhelmingly for me, is positive. It's been a game changer. But why has it been a game changer? If you remember Time magazine a few years ago, they voted who was the person of the year. And they said YouTube. Okay. They said, or YouTube or Facebook, because it was the people who made the news. And that's what's continuing to happen now. We are making the news and taking the narrative from those big mainstream media into our own hands. But we've got to be careful, though. Going back to what you were saying at the beginning of this podcast, we've got to be careful that we are really disseminating what we are ingesting, because we're careful about the food we eat. We eat halal food, mashallah, tabarakallah. Where we've got to be careful about the information that we're ingesting, because it can cause psychological harm, and it can then transfer to belief. Okay, we've got to be careful about what we're ingesting, absorbing spiritually as well. So this is why we're clear about our sources of the deen and the sunnah and and the authenticity there. So that independence, that autonomy, that empowerment that we're given through social media, I used the word last week, I use it this week, is revolutionary. But we've got to be careful with how we utilize this tool and how we absorb this tool. And if we do it, making sure that we are reading between the lines, that we are not within an echo chamber that reinforces what we like to hear, that we're ready to be proven wrong, that we're ready to be corrected, enlightened, then it can be a very useful and powerful tool.
Yeah. And I think that it comes back to that whole, I mean, one of the things that I guess that I've realized is that one thing social media doesn't, it's not really going to do to you. It's not going to teach you how to think. That's part of the problem. And part of the problem is that one of the challenges I find that people don't think critically, and it goes both directions. And it comes back to that. I mean, when it comes to all this, I mean, I just think the whole pandemic is a really good example to discuss. And I always take pains to try and analyze, like, obviously my knowledge of biology and science and, is limited, right? So in order to understand what's going on, at a molecular level, I'm going to struggle a little bit with it. But it was, but at the end of the day, I still think what you can do is, as long as you know how to think critically and you know how to process information, you can do it. But what I find is people just don't, a couple of things people don't do, right? They don't seem to check their sources.
No.
Right? They're like, this is so, I'm one of, it's very interesting. I read this article. I thought, wow, this is amazing, right? Like, so basically, it was basically a supposed extract from a medieval document, right, about doctors in Geneva during the time of the plague there, right, actually making people infected because they were making money out of the plague, right? I thought, wow, that's really interesting. If it's true, that's the first thing I thought. Is it true? So what did I do? I started searching for this document on the internet, looking at archives. It was all in French. I know enough French, yeah. I actually searched through these volumes of this document, found that basically the so-called reference, the first thing I found out, there weren't even that many pages in that document anyway, right? So again, my alarm bells started ringing. Like, this is not deep detective work, yeah. This is just like basic, wait a minute, this is sort of too good to be true, right? And as it seemed, I kept asking people, what's the reference? Because I looked here and looked there, and there wasn't anything. Someone had just lied and invented it, it seems like. I'm still convinced it was, right? But no one seems to take time to do this. And it's the same the other way around. I mean, the interesting thing, bro, is that they've been lying to us about that. The scientists knew this thing was manufactured in the lab in Wuhan. They knew it from the beginning. And they lied. They lied to us. They have been lying to us this whole time. They knew it from the very beginning. Yeah, they roll out these scientists. Oh no, these experts. Yeah, no, because we can tell. We look at the RNA, we look at the DNA, and we can tell that this and that can't be manufactured. There's no way. We even had to remember a brother had an expert on his, 5 pillars to come and talk about it and whatever. It was lies, bro. They were outright lying to us because they didn't want to harm science in China.
Mm.
How many other lies have been told, bro? How many other lies, right? But sometimes it just takes a bit of critical thinking to think, wait a minute, this is...
Okay, I agree with you on that. No, I agree with you. But again, there you go. No, but I agree with you because because of the experiences, why is it come to a wider attention now? Because it's something that's affecting the entire world, okay?
Yeah.
But if you were to look from particular perspectives, and I'm going to say black perspectives again, The vaccinations that were being given, we've got the
we had this. I remember we had this concept. Yeah,
we have. And what happened to the Ethiopian Jews in Israel, sterilizing them? What happened in America? What's happened in Africa?
With the syphilis.
We know how vaccinations have been used, but bringing it to today. One of my close friends, you know him, mashallah, and he's a microbiologist, and I think that's right. I hope he's not going to chastise me and say, no, I'm not, I'm more than that. But we were speaking last week, and he was talking about the vaccinations and everything. And he said to me, he's had vaccination, I have as well. Circumstances behind it are different, where actually you have to. And we were talking about the boosters, and I learned from him, he said to me, he wouldn't have particular vaccinations because those vaccinations go into the DNA. Now that alarmed me. He said, but I will have this one because that's a traditional vaccine that doesn't go into the DNA. And after the conversation, I was like, oh my gosh, you've got a vaccine going into affecting your DNA. Now, Abdurraheem, let's say, for example, and I'm not a conspiracist and I'm not going one way or the other. You and I have sort of just left it because we know there's a polarization on either side. Yeah. I said to myself, let's say, for argument's sake, that social media, everything they're saying is true. Let's say for argument's sake, okay?
Yeah.
But what is there to say that down the line, because of the fear that's been instilled and transferred across the media, social media particularly, that when they decide let's say if or when they decide to start manipulating and instilling social control mechanisms, they can't do it with the booster next year, the flu jab. And what is there to say that can't happen if it hasn't happened already? So these things started alarming me. I was thinking to myself, we've got a problem here because we're facing something we've never faced before to this degree. Okay, we had the flu 100 years ago, killed many more than what we're seeing now. We're more advanced now. 50 to 100 million died with the estimated numbers. So Abdurraheem, what you're saying is absolutely correct. But it comes back down to what you've said about critical thinking. Okay. And Mr. Boot, I want to jump into what he said here, which was an important thing as well. And I want to ask you a question on this. Mr. Boot spoke about when he was younger, his knees, he always used to come into the home with his knees bloodied because he was always outside playing on the streets and everything like that. You and me know those days when we used to be out and come back in all rough and tough and everything like that. My question to you is this. Did we learn more knowledge-wise, mentally, psychologically, socially particularly? Did we learn more in the environment that Mr. Boot is describing than our kids are learning now via social media?
You see, the thing is, bro, I'm going to say, you see, my argument has often been that I think we learn differently. And I think this attitude, and this is what I've said with him, to my wife, with my friends and, people, I said, listen, the world is just different, right?
Right.
And I don't think it's necessarily worse or better. It's very easy to talk about the good old days. Yeah. Oh, the good old days. Yeah. How much? But I said, look, like I said, I often say there's nothing new under the sun. Right. And sure enough, if you go back in history and you look at when, for example, printing, when they moved from writing manuscripts to printing manuscripts, and when books became super commonly available, right?
Yeah.
When novels were being produced, it's very interesting in the 18th century, right? When novels became very popular and were being mass produced. They were so concerned about people spending so much time reading novels that it was dulling people's brains. Yeah. And we're talking about now things that are considered great classics of literature, like the Bronte sisters, Wuthering Heights. These things were called brain softening materials, right? You are not reading a Greek and Latin text. You are not reading what this and that. Yet these are considered to be great human stories. We're studying it in English literature. Thomas Hardy. So it's not like, seriously, this is, the same thing when TV came out. Yes. I mean, I think what you always do is when you get this new thing on TV, radio, you get an initial time when that you'll get a percentage of people, you'll get a generation, maybe a lost generation, unfortunately, who will spend way too much time watching TV, way too much time on social media, way too much time reading novels, way too much time, you know, reading clay tablets, whatever, hieroglyphics, whatever it is. Yeah. Okay. And but then people realize, you know, it just loses its appeal, and people do find a balance, because people don't want to be unhappy, and they can see when people are unhappy. They can see when, you know, you can start to see if social media makes people depressed and people start dying. You can see it. Yeah. You know, and people start realizing, okay, wait a minute, maybe this is not such a great thing. You know, people find a balance, bro. So I think, you know, sometimes we have to be part of the conversation. We have to have the conversation. We have to warn each other, because that's part of how we adjust. Yeah. That's how we adjust as a society. But I think we will adjust. And I think personally, bro, I think these things are, all of them, you know, radio, TV, social media, they like pieces of paper, right? Like writing, they are the most incredible tools. They are the most incredible means of learning, assessing, disseminating knowledge, you know, civil rights, human rights, love, peace, everything, right? And yes, similarly, they can be used for terrible things as well, just like almost everything you can think of, right? So what does it all come down to, bro? It all comes
That's
down
a good
to
point.
you and me taking responsibility and learning
Yes,
the right path and sticking on the right path.
I think that's key about learning responsibility. Again, what
Yeah.
you said about critical thinking, and but what I would say, and before I say that, I want to say that something else, talking about agreeing with you to an extent, and it's going to reveal our age. I can remember when, and we're not that old. I can remember when Channel 4, they was going to release a Channel 4, and everyone, wait, remember, it's only 3 channels: BBC
Yeah.
One,
4
BBC Two,
channels.
and
Woof.
ITV. And then
Yeah.
Channel 4, this independent channel, were going to come up. And I remember the day
Yeah.
we were sitting there and was like, okay, it's going to come on at this time. My friends were at home, we were at home, and was just waiting for this blank channel where the frequency was there to come to Channel 4.
Yeah.
Okay. Relatively speaking, and before anyone starts saying you guys must be old, no, we're not that old, but the technology has advanced that rapidly. That happened.
Yeah.
Then Channel 5, and then cable TV. And you know
Yeah.
what I'm doing? I'm saying again, with regards to, I think the youth have been exposed to far more at a younger age than we were. And I'm going to tell you why I say that.
Yeah.
And some will laugh, because the Michael Jackson Thriller song and video, when he was going to release the video, they only released it after midnight. And Michael Jackson had to put a disclaimer that he was not a believer in the occult and devil worship and everything. So I remember, because we were nightclubbing at that time, we were dancing, we used to go out, and we wanted to see, because we knew he was a good dancer. I was at my friend's house,
Yeah.
a lot of my friends there. It hit midnight. Why was it midnight? Because the kids would be in bed. There was the screening
Yeah.
after 9:30, 10:30, but this had to be
The
after midnight.
watershed, they call it, isn't it, or something? Yeah.
Watershed moment. So
Yeah.
I remember it hit midnight, and we were just there, and then the Thriller video came on. And as you know, today it was one of the most, it mimicked orchestrate what is it,
Yeah.
choreography.
Yeah.
That's what used to happen then. But now you've got you've got Transformer movies, you've got horror movies, you've got imagery that children were not allowed to see
Yeah.
under the age of 18 at that time. Nightmare on Elm Street, Freddy Krueger, Halloween. All, but we've got children now, 9, 10, 11, totally desensitized. Ibtisan 77, good year. 70s was good, a very good decade, mashallah, tabarakallah. And you should be proud, alhamdulillah. So my thing, Abdurraheem, is speaking to what you're talking about now. Yes. Then Channel 4, there was that, oh, it's gonna distract us, it's going to corrupt us. We've got enough TV channels. The purists were saying that. Then Channel 5, then cable TV. Now that's all antiquated. So I suppose what you're saying is a reality that is going to take place in the time to come, 10 years, 20 years, where everyone's like, oh, the internet, I haven't got time for it. There's something else that's now the new fad, as
Yeah.
it were. What I would say, ask you is this though, Abdurraheem, as we're coming up to the hour, while social media has many good benefits to it, just like driving cars, it's more beneficial. Just like doing some of the other things that we do, it's far more beneficial. When abused, is when it's harmful in everything that we do. If you drive a car recklessly and that's how you're driving, damaging. If you're going to use social media in a reckless, neglectful way, damaging to you as well as to others. But I want to ask you this, Abdurraheem.
Yeah.
There's nothing better than direct engagement, communication, interaction, being you and I, many may have been shocked last week when I said it, we haven't seen each other. We haven't been in the same space as each other together, car, home, whatever, like we used to do, drinking tea, going Richmond Park or whatever, traveling up and down the country. We haven't seen each other since I think it was 1999, 2000.
Yeah.
But our brotherhood is that strong that it seems like yesterday that we were together. But doing this with you over the last year or so has been absolutely amazing.
Yeah, I don't feel like I haven't seen you. I definitely, yeah.
But if being back with you physically, for me, would epitomize and surpass just in one day. If you and I spent a day together, it would surpass everything we've done just in the point of company. Such is the chemistry and engagement and brotherhood and camaraderie. And I feel that about others who I'm close to, like I am yourself. Surely that surpasses social media, not just you and me, for all humans.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm just a cold-hearted Englishman, right? Who's come from who's become socially dysfunctional by going to a boarding school, right? It was one of the known psychological side effects of boarding school is you become emotionally deadened, right? And maybe I'm, despite what people may think, I'm quite introverted. People may think, how can you be introverted? Like you speak and speak as cool and you give all these talks and lectures, but I'm just quite happy to sit on my own for hours and days and whatever. And to be, the other thing is the funny thing is when you said to me, I haven't seen each other for 10 years, it's like, what are you talking
10,
about?
20.
Like, I literally feel, I feel like I'm sort of been seeing you every week now,
Mashallah.
So I don't, like me personally, right? I'm not like, but that's me. I'm a bit weird, right? Like, I barely even phone my kids, or like the only person I phone even remotely regularly is, my mum, right? I'm just like, when I see a person and I'm with them, that's it, they've got everything from me. And when I'm not, it's sort of like, it is what it is. I'm just a very in the moment type of person.
Right.
And for me, I find whatever it is I'm looking for, I find it in this moment right now. Yeah. So I am totally engaged in what we are doing right now. And like when we're shut off, I'll be totally engaged in whatever else it is. And I guess I am that sort of person. So I find it very easy to, get super absorbed in whatever it is that I'm doing, I guess people are different. Like I'm not a person who craves a lot of social interaction generally.
Right.
Yeah.
I think once upon a time I was like that. My gang, my friends and everything, and we were always together, and there wasn't social media, obviously. I'm similar to you now, in the sense that I'm happy to engage as we are. But I think there's nothing.
I'm not saying it wouldn't be nice to see you, bro. It'd be great to see you, bro.
No, mashallah. No, I know. But
we go and get a nice burger or something, bro.
Oh, definitely. No, Abdurraheem, what we used to have at yours was scones and jam and a cup of tea. That's what the true English style. But for me, I agree with you on what you're saying now. But when it's loved ones, friends, there's nothing like a group of us sitting, engaging, feeling that ambiance. Okay, whether it's in the park, whether it's nothing will replace Abdurraheem. You've done a lot online. I've done a lot online. Nothing will replace the study circles that used to take place in your home. In
it's true, bro. They were. Yeah, you're right. You're amazing. Right. You're absolutely right. That
Monday's the beginning of the week. No, you know, Boomtown Rats. I don't like Mondays. We love Mondays as new Muslim converts. It's like, right, I finish work, get home, rip off the suit, straight where you going, everyone knew. And as you know, Abdurraheem, sometimes I had to take some of the sisters who came by London Transport because the circles finished late. We had to take them across to Finsbury Park so you had people coming from everywhere. Hyde Park, we'd give the dawah the park. They said, where can we get more of this? And they'd come to yours. Sisters upstairs, brothers downstairs, in the summer, out in the garden. It was as much what took place after the study circles as what took place during the study circles. And it was electric, Abdurraheem.
The water fights.
The water fights.
Yes, Palmer and the water fights.
There were water fights where the guns came out with the sisters.
Yeah, water guns, bro, please. Yeah, water guns, Just
water guns.
The guns came out, the water guns, The super soakers, bro. Super soakers.
Having the vantage point from being upstairs and soaking us downstairs because
the sisters dropping water bombs on us. Yeah,
exactly. So see,
some times, bro.
Surprised that this is how we were. Yes, Salafis were like this. Don't believe the press. Don't believe the hype. But the fact, I'm coming back to it. While social media, what we're doing now, Abdurraheem, engaging the brothers and sisters who engage with us week in, week out, and that's what makes this show, I think, what it is, mashallah, tabarakallah. But inshallah, one day, and this is what I hope for, never said this before, if we could do an event, and Hassan, I hope you're listening, if we could do a piece of cake where we are in the same vicinity, Abdurraheem, and we could invite all the brothers and sisters, and they come, and we're all in the same vicinity, at the same time, engaging. And instead of them posting up their questions and their comments and observations, they could be making them, having the opportunity to make them, engage. And we actually are in the same space, feeling the energy that we feel here, but amplified, multiplied, because we're within the same building, the same premises. I hope one day, inshallah, I hope that's something we can do, even if it's on one occasion, because I think it will be something to behold, inshallah.
Inshallah, bro. Inshallah. Well, I mean, maybe that's the conclusion. Maybe the best thing for social media is to be a platform or a means to actually create social interaction in the real world, not a substitute for it.
What a fantastic idea.
Maybe that's how we should use it and think of it. Inshallah. But I will endeavor to try and do that a bit more, and to try and turn some of my social media interactions into real life interactions. And I'm gonna experiment with that, inshallah. Move out of my introverted little my introverted space and go out and meet people, inshallah.
And as Hassan has highlighted at the bottom there, a piece of cake live coming soon, inshallah. And Abdurraheem, maybe we can look at that for the
when
summer.
you coming to UK, bro, so we can organize it.
I would come specifically for that, to be honest with you, inshallah. So if that's going to be something, and it's you, and what will happen, Abdurraheem, we can build a piece of cake live, but Abdurraheem and Abdul Haqq Baker coming back together after over 20 years, physically, of course, physically.
Yeah, sounds good, bro. Sounds good.
Abdurraheem,
right, bro. Well, until that time, until next week, because I don't think we'll be doing it before next week's. But inshallah, that was a fascinating discussion as always, bro. And for my brother over there, Dr. Abdul Haqq Baker.
My brother over there,
Abdurraheem Green. It's been a
piece of cake.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.